Hello, this is Brooke, and welcome to Boss Moves and Benefits. Today, we are going to be diving into 1095C, ACA management. I know it's mid year, so a lot of us have already done all of our compliance reporting, and we're not looking forward to doing it in another 6 months. But on
That's a way to start the episode.
On this episode today, we're going to have Robin Ball, Ken Ball, and our in-house specialist, Jigel Panillo. So let's kick it off here. Jigel, let's talk about at first look, ACA, when you're talking to employers, what are some of the first questions that you're going to ask them about?
I think it's important to understand how they're managing ACA, how many employees they have allocated to ACA in general, to 1095Cs, auditing, just the time it takes to audit and review the data to make sure that they are compliant. So many employers usually, the last thing they think about is 1095C and or ACA. So typically it's sort of like something that they get rushly done at the end of the month to identify new eligibles or at the end of the year for 1095C. But there's so much more that they need to be doing on a weekly, monthly basis to make sure that the data is accurate and that they're appropriately capturing eligibles.
I think you've really touched something on there, Jigel, that I wanted to try and focus on, which is, so if you are an applicable large group employer with 50 full-time equivalents, you have to do this, right? Which means there
Correct.
are hundreds, thousands of companies that are doing this, that are required to do it. So what makes us unique, right? How are we creating value for our clients in delivering these services?
But I think we're doing it in many ways. So we're obviously carving out this from you, take this responsibility from your employees and being able to manage this on your behalf. Plus, we have the appropriate partners to make sure that you're staying compliant, and we have the staffing to make sure that we're auditing, looking at the data, and advising you as to whether there's any data holes or anything like that that may impact our final reporting. So ultimately, I mean, with our staffing and the tools and our partners to manage 1095C and ACA in general, I think we provide a robust offering to all large groups and even small groups, honestly.
I think the hard part too is the reporting pieces that, especially when we're onboarding employers and if they're going to be pulling the reports out of their benefit administration system or HRIS system, they have a really hard time creating these complex reports. So what we do is we basically ask for simplified reporting that we pull into our system. And then that way we can digest and put into the output that we need in order to break it down and measure every single month.
So you said again something that I think is key, and I want to dovetail that with something that Jigel mentioned, which was auditing, right?
Yeah.
So theoretically, we have eligibility rules. We put the eligibility rules in our system. Employees work the required amount of hours, or they don't. And at face value, it seems relatively simple, and it should run. And then at the end of the year, we submit our reports. Well, we learned quickly in year one that's just not the way it needs to be able to work. It has to be consistently monitored on a monthly basis so that, one, we're finding discrepancies, and two, we don't end up with this massive project in January when it's time to submit the filing. So maybe, Jigel, you could shine a light on how we've been able to create process to support that aspect of it.
Of course. So ACA is really complex, right? So it's not only obviously your part-time employees that you have to be concerned of, but even full-time employees going to part-time status, your FMLA, your rehires. So there's many different rules that actually impact your ability to be able to measure or track data correctly. So these are all things that we look at, right? So it's not just coding and sending that over to the IRS. It's actually looking at your data. I think one thing that we see, especially with multi-location clients, is that they struggle to basically be able to manage it, ACA eligibility down to the location level. So by us auditing and diving into your own data on a weekly basis or even or monthly basis, I think it helps us understand where your data issues are. And then we obviously work with you to make sure that those are fixed so that we can continue to plow forward with ACA compliance. But there are a lot of complexities to ACA, and obviously we help you through that process.
It's not just multi-location clients. And, sometimes when our larger enterprise clients, let's use an example of casinos, right? They have many people in HR and sometimes many different locations within one real location, one department. Yeah. So what ends up happening is that people will terminate and they're not entering that term date into the system timely, right? It may be 30, 60, 90 days delayed. But what we're able to do with some of the trending reports that we provide our clients is identify those people ahead of time where we're still within a termination window that's going to meet your COBRA requirements, that's going to meet your carrier requirements, and say, hey, this person has not had hours in 30 to 45 days. Yeah. Are they still eligible for coverage? Are they even still an active employee? I think that's been really pivotal for some of it, not only multi-location, but even when we have multi-departments within these larger enterprise clients.
Casino is a city of it on its own, right?
Right.
Casinos are so complex.
Yeah.
So all the data points, right? So if you have a single HR department where you're entering all the terminations and so forth, it's easier. And even then, I think, the complexity of it and divulging someone's time and effort into ACA and managing that process could be very complex and a burden, honestly.
So I was going to say, let's sit there. So, these are all good ideas and processes and challenges I think most people have. Our back-end system is Equifax. It's one of the largest and most reputable, I think, in the market. We kind of have our front end and we feed Equifax, and so we can see what's happening. So if you remove CBC from the equation and an employer has Equifax directly, for example, these are the kind of things that they're going to have to do on a weekly and monthly basis, right? They're going to have to build those complex files. They're going to have to import those complex files. Those are all things we manage on behalf of the client. Then they have to look at their dashboard, and it's a beautiful dashboard that's going to say that they're out of compliance with X, Y, and Z person and that they're at risk for X dollars. Mm-hmm. Looks really scary. It's probably better that we look at it and address the problem before they can see it live and let them know that this is what has to get fixed, or at the end of the year, this is the penalty that they could be challenged with, right? So we're addressing those on a weekly basis with those imports. And then monthly, we're looking at the audit, right? Auditing all those codes and are they accurate? So if you do have a retro term, Brooke, to your point, mm-hmm. We need to look at those terminations and are they correct for that particular month? Did they go back and adjust that report? Yeah. QLEs we're addressing, new hires we're addressing. So I think that is the piece that if we're auditing on a monthly basis and we are addressing all of the issues with the data and the reports that Equifax is giving us in the dashboards, then at the end of the year, to Ken's point, we're going to have a real clean slate to be able to submit that. If you don't do that, at the end of the year is almost impossible. It's very scary.
Let's stop there for a second. That's kind of where I wanted to talk about, take the conversation rather. So I almost look at it like it's like a car going down the freeway, right? And so between what you guys have all described relative to understanding eligibility, looking at the reports, managing hours, communicating back to the departments, doing the monthly auditing, we're all preparing to get to our destination, which is the end of the year. And one, the filings have to go to the IRS, and two, the reports have to go out to each and every participating employee. So to your point, Robin, in theory, we should just hit a button on our software and all those things would just magically happen.
That don't happen.
we know it doesn't work like that. And that is where we create value. So again, GL, I'm going to kind of throw it to you. How are we creating value for our clients through that end of the year submission process?
Just making it easy, right? So from the distribution, from the filing, the state filings, we do that for them as well. Which is, many other states are coming into where now you need to actually file with each state. We do that as well. Then the federal, we look at your penalties. All of that is done for you. So it makes it really easy and simple for an employer to hand this over to us as far as the administration portion of it. and we would take it from soups to nuts, right? So distributing the forms, even now that with the Paper Act, right, we know the employers are no longer required to distribute these forms. But we have to give them access electronically. We have a service center where if the employee wants a copy, will generate that copy and send it over to them to remain compliant. So that's something that your HR representatives don't have to do. It's something that we take on for you. If there are any errors, if there happen to be any errors, then we go ahead and correct those errors, reproduce the form or corrective form, and then go file that form as well with the IRS.
Let's spend a second there. We've dotted every I, we've crossed every T throughout the course of the year. We've done our audits weekly, monthly. We've communicated with every single person. There's still some things that are beyond everyone's control. So, for example, someone, despite all those checks and balances, goes out to the marketplace and tries to purchase an individual plan with a subsidy, which would trigger a whole sequence of events, which again is an opportunity for us to create some value for our client. Can we talk about that?
When you get the nasty IRS letters, Miguel.
Well, not just the IRS letters, it's like the error reporting, right? Sometimes where it's the wrong last name or wrong social. So
correct. So there's two different error reports. So after we submit the 1095-C file to the IRS resubmits a file to us, and most likely there's always an error. Accepted with errors is what they return. They can reject them too for whatever reason, and we address those as well. But accepted with errors are basically mismatches, whether they're date of birth, social security numbers, names that maybe are different than what we have in the system. So basically, we work on those two. We download the file and we scrub them. We send them to you if we need any help identifying whether a social security number is wrong, or maybe you have something on the I-9 that we can use. We can communicate directly with the employee, whether it's via email or text or letter. So those are things that we can do, and it's all obviously up to you, and we determine that through the implementation process. But that is something that we definitely take care of as well. So then the secondary is the J226 letters, right? So those are letters that we also receive. They're kind of scary. Some of those penalties and the demand for payment are quite high. They also have deadlines. So that's something that we also take into account when responding to the IRS on these letters. So we respond for you. We also follow up with the IRS to make sure that they've received it, right? Because these are faxes, and we know that faxes, very old school at this point in time, but we send faxes to the IRS and then make sure that they receive them. And then once they receive them, we track the progress, right? Whether it was approved or not, whether they have additional questions. So that's something that we also do for them and when addressing these letters. And we don't let that process go until those letters are resolved, and hopefully saving you a lot of money through the process.
Right.
So backing up then just a little bit and just thinking about, the how and why that this all is happening, right? So it's a requirement for large group employers that they have to have these processes in place to be compliant with the Affordable Care Act and everything that goes along with that. And ultimately, it's creating an environment that is fair for everybody to determine who has access to benefits. But at the end of the day, what we're guarding against are these massive potential fines that are there for employers that don't comply. So can you give an example of how those can grow or compile for an employer?
Sure. So, they're quite high. So basically, it's somebody goes to the marketplace and although you're providing the correct affordable health care, care that is compliant, and they still go out to the market because of the tax breaks and everything else. They may lack education, right? You think that this far out now with ACA, everybody sort of would understand when they cannot go to the marketplace, but it happens. So the IRS obviously wants their money back and assumes automatically that you have not offered these employee benefits, and we have to go ahead and reply to those from that perspective. So, that's the majority of the penalties that we see are people or part-time employees going out to the market and being insured through the market because maybe it's less expensive for them. However, if you're doing what you need to do as an employer, which is to provide qualified and affordable health care, then they have to enroll in our health plan rather than the state or the government health plan.
Yeah. And then I was going to kind of tee off of that and just say, before you even get into this portion where we're measuring, where we're checking eligibility, we have to, from a consultative experience, is that we're going to sit there and we're going to make sure that first and foremost, are your plans affordable and do they meet requirements? Oftentimes with smaller employers, maybe this mid-sized group that we talk to a lot, right? 50 to 100, where the affordability for them to offer full group plans is not full coverage medical plans is really not there. So they end up with these MEC, or MEC stands for minimal essential coverage plans. And sometimes those do not meet the IRS requirements. And it puts them in a really challenging situation to try and correct that later on, especially if they're going to be fined. And they can say, oh, well, we've never been fined in years offering these plans, but they're not compliant, depending on what the plan is. So we need to be really careful when we're consulting these employers of how to look at your plans in order to make sure that you're hitting every single requirement that the ACA mandates.
So, all right. So, Jigel, we were talking about, just the risk that's there from an employer from a compliance standpoint. And, one of the values that we are delivering is keeping them compliant, thus avoiding the potential for fees. And when I look at or fines rather, when I look at these fines just for 2025, it's $2,900 per FTE was penalty A, known as the sledgehammer, $4,350 per employee on penalty B, which is known as the tack hammer. So just carving out penalty A on its own, if you had it at 100 person employer group, which typically more, most of our groups are in the 1,000, 2,000, 10,000 range, just for 100 employees. They're talking about $290,000 worth of fines, not to mention legal fees, the potential for civil liability, et cetera. So it adds up quickly. We're doing what we can to create a very positive experience for the employers and the employees in terms of their eligibility and the day-to-day management of the plan. But at the end of the day, we're helping our clients avoid millions of dollars worth of fees and fines. Mm-hmm. So,
and we've seen them. We've seen those letters. They're quite high and quite scary, honestly. Yeah. So being able to respond to the IRS and resolve those issues through our data, I think it's an incredible asset.
Yeah, there's 7-figure fines on the letters.
So we've been doing this since ACA rolled out for dozens of employers on behalf of millions of employee lives. How many dollars of fines have our clients paid out?
0.
That's right.
That's the right answer. That's the right answer. I want to go into one more thing, which is, I think overlooked and probably a little very difficult, because from an ACA compliance perspective, I think we do a really good job. We're getting the hours, we're managing the hours, we're making the offers where we need to make the offers, we're auditing the files, we're looking at our risks. And so we're doing all the right things. I feel 100% confident with our clients that under ACA that they're compliant. The other way, and it's not an ACA necessarily issue, is that for folks that are full-time status, right? And so under ACA, you're not going to get a fine if you're offering someone benefits that has a full-time status that is working part-time hours. So you're not penalized for that. You are penalized for it under FMLA and discrimination loss. So I think that's a completely different issue and something that we see a lot. So it is mostly in payroll when employees are tagged as full-time and they start working part-time hours, especially coming in and out of leave or intermittent leave. And then what happens is that they are not, their benefits are not being terminated, or they're not going to ACA until they're out of their probationary period, right? So, Chico, you want to discuss that and how we're trying to tackle it and the issues that we see these employers have?
Sure. So I call it ACA in reverse, right? So it's basically employers are so accustomed now to looking at the employees and specifically part-time employees and making sure that they're, measuring their hours, making sure that they're offering at 30 hours, right? That's sort of the easy part too. The hard part is for us, and I think something that employers do not focus on or even contemplate is looking at it in reverse, right? So how many employees coded full-time are not working enough hours to meet that 30-hour full-time definition? based on your benefits, your SPDs, your certificates of coverage. All of that basically defines an employee as having to work 30 hours, right? So what happens though, if there are full-time status employees and you're not looking at how many hours they're working, which could happen at any department, specifically again in departmentals like a casino or a large group with multiple locations, is where an employee is not working or meeting that 30-hour average threshold, is that we look at that as well, right? So because again, that opens up all host errors that you could, or issues that you can run up against when employees are on coverage, employer coverage, baseline coverage, STD, LTD, all of these coverages could potentially represent a claim that they are not satisfying the requirement of the certificate of coverage. We've seen that a lot and have come up with processes to manage that for employers. So I know, Brooke, we've done that for several of your clients.
Yeah. Well,
she's got all the bad clients, right?
Yeah, I know. All the problem children just come to my desk. I actually wanted to just kind of tipping off that and give everyone a hot tip that you need to be looking at eligibility from a standpoint of full-time to part-time in the way that you're probably not compliant because you're probably not offering coverage to those employees as they move from full-time to part-time if they're in their measurement window, which is huge, right, Jigal? We see that all the time, and we've had a few debates about it. So I would say a hot tip for all of those benefit professionals out there looking at your ACA program, ask the question, when my employees are moving from full-time to part-time, what happens to their benefits? And you'll be interested to find the answer.
That's a separate issue, but definitely a big one, right? That you're throwing out there. So what I was referring to mainly is full-time status employees who are receiving all benefits through the employer, but are not meeting that 30-hour threshold, right? Whether if we look at it every 90 days, typically with some of our clients, the ones that are willing to do this or want us to do this for them. We send out letters to their managers if they are not working an average of 30. So we give them an opportunity to raise those hours up. But definitely there's risk, especially again with life insurance claims or short-term and long-term disability claims. Carriers want support and sometimes request for payroll validation as to whether that employee is full-time and is working those hours. So that creates an issue. Your point is part-time status changes, right? And this happens a lot too with company transfers. So if an employee goes from casino A to casino B, right, and they're all one company, or different locations, some employers will terminate that employee record under that account or casino, for example, and then rehire them under the new account or division or whatever it is. So at that point, they have to keep in mind that those benefits have to carry over because you're still one company, and that stability period applies to all of them. With part-time as well. If you drop from full-time to part-time, you have to maintain those benefits for those employees because they're in a stability period.
Right. Not all benefits, just so we're clear. We're just talking about the medical.
The medical benefits. Correct.
Just medical life.
Well, so two issues that we just wanted to identify, right? So for hot tip for everyone out there, one, we're talking about trending eligibles. How are your employees trending? Are they trending full-time? If they're not, what do you need to do? Issue number 2 is, are your employees moving from full-time to part-time in a stability measurement period? And are you continuing medical coverage for them? Those are like the 2 biggest issues I think that we see month over month when we take on new clients. Those are the 2 biggest things that we see that we need to solve for immediately because a lot of the times they are not compliant.
Right. And then transfers too, depending on how they manage transfers, that could also become an issue.
Yeah. Okay. So we are coming to the end here of our episode. And I just wanted to go around the table and figure out speed round wise, what is your favorite thing about our management technique when it comes to ACA management? And I'll go first. My favorite thing is giving those 2 hot tips to our new clients and them realizing that maybe it wasn't, they weren't doing it before.
That always happens. Go, Jigal.
For me, I think it's a discovery process, right? Working with our clients to understand what it is that they're doing, find the holes and mending those gaps, right? So that is, I think, exciting for me is to be able to find the fixes and applying those.
Mine is we've worked really hard on these processes, really, really hard, and integrating the right technologies and having the right support team. So my favorite part about our process is that Jigel tells me the second week of January that everything's done.
I think overall, it's just, again, going back to creating value, right? We mentioned it at the top. I mean, the fact that Jigel would find any part of this exciting, in and of itself, such that I could tell you that probably 90+% of the people that we encounter, not only do they don't find it exciting, they don't want to do it.
Yeah.
Who wants to do this? Right? We'll do it.
Or they don't have time.
We'll do it, and we'll do all of it, and we'll serve it back up to you, on a very little simple platter.
And we have people in our house that like to do it
and are excited about it.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, I had to learn to love it. Since it didn't go away, I had to learn to love it.
Well, thank you guys for joining us today. That's Boss Moves with Benefits. Find us at cbcins.com, or you can join us on YouTube. Jigel, thanks for joining us. And Rob and Ken, thank you as well.
My pleasure. Thank you.